the very definition of what it means to be an executive, what performance actually is. Our source is Peter Drucker's absolute classic, The Effective Executive.
It's such a cornerstone text, isn't it? It's all about getting the right things done, which is a world away from just, getting things done.
Exactly. And what's amazing, what I think you found too, is how timeless this all feels. I mean, we're talking about ideas that are decades old.
Decades. There's a 50th anniversary edition out, and honestly, the advice feels more urgent today than it probably did back then. The language might be a little vintage,
A little bit, yeah.
but the core problems that knowledge workers face, they're identical. It's kind of scary.
It is. And look, our mission here for you is to really internalize Drucker's main point, which is that effectiveness is not some magical talent. It is a discipline.
Something you learn.
Something you learn. It's a set of practices. And to get there, we have to start with this really surprising finding that kicks the whole book off. He calls it the paradox of brilliance.
I love that phrase, the paradox of brilliance. It
Yeah.
just completely flips our modern assumption that, raw intelligence equals success.
Right. The source states it so clearly. People with tremendous brilliance are often strikingly ineffectual.
Ineffectual. So you could be a genius and still accomplish nothing.
That's the starting point. They have the IQ, the insight, the imagination, all the raw material, but they completely fail to turn that potential into actual achievement. They're rich in input, but totally poor in output.
So intelligence and knowledge are like the ingredients in a kitchen. But effectiveness is being the chef. It's the engine that actually turns them into a meal.
That's a perfect analogy. Drucker says intelligence, imagination, and knowledge are absolutely essential, but they only set the limit of what's possible. Effectiveness is the separate thing, the tool that actually makes them produce results.
It's what unlocks the brilliance.
Yes. And this deep dive is for you, the knowledge worker. Because Drucker defines executive so broadly. It's not just the C-suite.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
He says if you're responsible for a contribution that affects the organization's ability to perform, you're an executive.
Whether you run the whole business, a small university department, a hospital wing, or you're in government. If you contribute with your mind, this is for you.
And to really get this, we have to draw a hard line between effectiveness and efficiency.
This is critical. A century ago, a manual worker needed efficiency, doing things right. You can measure the quality of a pair of shoes. It's tangible.
But a knowledge worker isn't making shoes. They're making decisions, creating information, shaping strategy.
Exactly. So the knowledge worker, the executive, needs effectiveness, getting the right things done. It's a strategic challenge, not a task level one. If you're super efficient at writing the wrong report, you've achieved absolutely nothing.
And this is why it's so critical now in the 21st century.
Because society has completely shifted. The center of gravity in every organization is now the knowledge worker, the person who uses what they have between their ears.
But the problem is, an idea is useless on its own.
Right. Knowledge output, an idea, a piece of information is totally useless until someone else, usually a colleague in a completely different specialty, can take it and apply it.
So you can't just be a brilliant specialist in a silo. You have to make sure your knowledge actually lands somewhere useful.
You have to provide effectiveness. And Drucker sees this as an economic imperative. For developed nations to stay competitive against low-wage competition, the productivity of the knowledge worker is. It's everything.
So how do we get this discipline? He breaks
Yeah.
it down into a few core habits.
He does. He calls them the scales you have to practice until they become second nature. We've boiled them down to 5 for this deep dive.
Okay, what are they?
Number 1, know thy time. 2, focus on outward contribution. 3, build on strengths.
Okay.
4, concentrate on the few major areas or first things first. And finally, number 5, make effective decisions.
That's our roadmap. But before we dig into that first habit, we have to tackle the big question. If this is so important, why is it so hard? Why do so many smart people fail at being effective?
And the answer is, it's the environment. The executive's daily reality is set up to demand effectiveness while simultaneously making it almost impossible to achieve.
It actively pushes you towards futility.
Unless you make a special effort to fight back. He contrasts it with a physician. A doctor's context is pretty clear. A patient comes in, there are symptoms. The goal is health.
The executive's world is the total opposite. It's messy, fragmented, chaotic.
Exactly. And Drucker identifies 4 of these executive realities, these pressures that you are constantly fighting against.
Reality 1 is a killer.
Hmm.
Your time belongs to everyone else. The executive is a captive of the organization.
Oh, just think about it. You sit down to finally work on that big project, And what happens? The phone rings. An email dings. A colleague pops by for just 5 minutes.
And that was before Slack and Microsoft Teams. Now it's a constant virtual barrage.
He was writing about junior executives spending more than half their day in meetings or conversations. Today, that number has to be even higher. Your day is just pulverized into tiny, useless fragments.
Which is lethal for knowledge work.
It is, but it's not just the interruptions. It's the ceremony.
Ah, the story of the company chairman. This one really hit home.
It's incredible. This CEO said for the first 2 years in the job, he had to eat out almost every single night. Official functions. Christmas and New Year's were his only nights off.
And he knew it was a waste of time. It contributed nothing.
Nothing. But it was a mandatory ceremony of the office. The higher you go, the more your time is stolen by things that are not your actual work.
And if you just go with that flow, you hit reality number 2.
Yeah.
You're forced to just operate.
Operating just means being reactive, putting out fires. The moment-to-moment flow of events is almost always misleading. If you let the ringing phone or the urgent email dictate your day, you'll just fritter yourself away.
The loudest problem isn't necessarily the most important one.
Almost never. The screaming customer might represent a tiny fraction of your business, while a quiet, gradual shift in the market could be an existential threat. The flow of events doesn't come with priority tags. You have to apply them yourself.
Okay, and that leads to reality 3, which is this institutional trap. You're trapped inside the organization.
Right. Your effectiveness depends almost entirely on people you have no direct control over, people sideways in other departments, or your own superiors.
And in a knowledge organization, everyone is a specialist. We all speak different languages.
A tax accountant and a cost accountant are worlds apart. A design engineer and a manufacturing specialist. They just aren't in phase, as Drucker puts it. The tax accountant can have the most brilliant idea in the world, but if the cost accountant can't use that information for budgeting, the idea is useless. It dies on the vine.
So you're not just managing up and down the chain of command. You have to constantly be managing sideways, building bridges between these silos.
Constantly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the fourth and, I think, the most dangerous reality today, the inside versus the outside.
This is a huge one. The idea that you see the inside, the costs, the effort, the politics, as your reality. But all the results, they're on the outside.
It's a devastating bias. Everything inside the company is a cost center. The results are in the customer's wallet, the patient getting better, the market adopting your product.
An organization should be spending as little as possible internally to produce those outside results. But that's not what happens, is it?
No. Large organizations get bloated. And Drucker's analogy here is just beautiful. He compares a large organization to a complex animal versus an amoeba.
Okay, unpack the amoeba analogy.
An amoeba is a single cell. It's in direct, constant contact with its environment. It doesn't need a nervous system or a circulatory system. It's perfectly efficient.
But a big company.
A big company is like a higher animal. It has to devote huge amounts of energy and resources to internal tasks. Circulation, information, bureaucracy, that's the corporate nervous system. And all of that is necessary for survival.
But it diverts your attention and your resources away from the outside, away from the customer.
Precisely. And this is where Drucker issued a warning about technology that is just chillingly accurate today. He said the computer would make this problem worse.
Wait, that feels wrong. We talk about being data-driven. How can better, faster information make things worse?
Because the computer is what he called a mechanical moron. It's a logic machine. It's brilliant with quantifiable data. And the danger is that it floods the executive with fast, quantified internal data costs, production rates, efficiency metrics.
And you become blind to the real reality.
The qualitative, unquantifiable outside reality. The computer tells you how you're doing inside, but it can't tell you why the market is changing its mind outside.
Because that change isn't a fact yet. It's a perception, a mood.
Exactly. And by the time the computer can count it as a hard fact, it's usually way too late to do anything about it.
This is where those examples of qualitative failure are just so powerful. The thalidomide tragedy, for instance.
A terrible example. By the time doctors had the statistics to prove that the number of deformed babies was way above normal, the kind of data a computer needs, the tragedy was already global.
But it was prevented in the U.S.
Why? Because one public health physician noticed a qualitative change, a minor, seemingly meaningless side effect, a skin tingling.
It wasn't a number. It was a pattern she perceived. She connected that tiny detail to a completely different event from years before. That perception was the key.
The numbers came too late. And you see the same thing in business with the famous failure of the Ford Edsel.
Right. All the quantitative data, all the market research said the Edsel was the perfect car for the market at that time.
Every number supported the launch, but the real shift was qualitative. American consumers weren't buying cars based on their income bracket anymore. They were shifting to what Drucker called taste-determined market segmentation.
They were buying a lifestyle, an identity, not just a bigger car because they got a raise.
Exactly. And the statistics confirming that shift only appeared after the Edsel was a spectacular failure. It wasn't a data failure, it was a perception failure.
So the real danger is what he calls computeritis. You start to dismiss anything that can't be quantified.
You get divorced from reality. And to fight all these pressures, the captive time, the reactive operating, the internal focus, you need discipline. And the very first discipline starts with time.
Okay, habit 1. Know thy time. This feels fundamental. But he insists you don't start by planning your time. You start by finding out where it actually goes. Why is that the first step?
Because any plan you make without real data is pure fantasy. The simple fact is, humans have a terrible time sense. We're great with space, but awful with time.
You mean we just can't remember accurately how we spent the day?
Not even close. He talks about an experiment where they asked executives to guess their time allocation. Then they made them keep a detailed log.
Yeah.
The actual records never matched the guesses. Not once. We lie to ourselves about where our time goes.
So if you think you're spending 30% of your time on strategy, but the log shows it's actually 80% in useless internal meetings, any plan you make is built on a foundation of sand.
Exactly. So the first step is mechanical. You keep a log in real time, not from memory, and you have to do it regularly, maybe for a few weeks, twice a year, because we all drift. We drift back into wasting time on trivia.
And keeping that log reveals something critical about knowledge work itself, which is this idea of the minimum time quantum.
Yes. This is so important, especially in our multitasking world. Effective knowledge work needs big, continuous chunks of time. Little 5-minute dribs and drabs are useless for anything important.
You can't write a strategic plan or design a complex system in those little gaps between meetings.
Absolutely not. And if you get interrupted an hour into a deep task, you don't just lose the 5 minutes of the interruption, you often lose the entire hour because you have to restart your whole thought process.
Gerker suggests that real needle-moving work requires blocks of 5 to 12 hours.
He does. And this is especially true for the most important work an executive does. People decisions.
Right. He says fast people decisions are almost always wrong decisions.
They're incredibly time-consuming if you do them right. Look at Alfred P. Sloan at General Motors. He had this amazing process. He never made a personnel decision the first time it came up.
That sounds so slow by today's move fast and break things mantra.
But it was effective. He'd spend hours thinking it through, make a tentative choice, and then intentionally put it away for a few days or a week. Then he'd come back and retrace his entire thought process from scratch. He only moved forward if he came up with the same name 2 or 3 times in a row.
He understood that something that important deserved a significant quantum of time.
Uninterrupted time. So once you have the log and you see the reality of your fragmented day, you start the diagnosis. He calls it pruning. You ask 3 questions.
The first one is my favorite. What doesn't need to be done at all?
It's so liberating. Just find things that you can stop doing and no one will even notice. Consign them to the wastebasket.
Those pointless committees, the ceremonial speeches, the reports nobody reads.
Remember that chairman who had to eat out every night? He discovered that a full third of those dinners were completely unnecessary. The hosts were just inviting him out of habit. He learned to say no, and he got a third of his evenings back.
The second question is about delegation, but not in the way we usually think about it. It's what can be done by somebody else.
Right. It's not about teaching a subordinate to do your job. It's about ruthlessly pushing tasks off your plate, even if you're good at them, so that you can get to your unique, important work.
Like a senior executive spending an hour booking their own complex travel arrangements.
A total waste. An assistant can do that, probably better. The goal isn't to offload things you dislike. It's to offload everything that is not your core contribution so you can free up that time.
And the third question is the real test of a good manager. What do I do that wastes other people's time?
This takes courage. To go to your team and ask, what am I doing that gets in your way? What report, what meeting, what process of mine is just a complete waste of your time?
And that gets at all the bureaucratic nonsense that flows downhill.
Absolutely. The book gives that great example of the financial executive who held these huge, all-inclusive meetings. He was afraid of offending people by not inviting them.
But when he finally asked, he found out nobody wanted to be there.
Exactly. They all saw it as a massive waste of their time. He was creating a problem to solve a perceived emotional risk that didn't even exist. He cut the meetings down to just the 3 people who needed to be there and saved hundreds of man-hours.
This whole pruning process sounds like it could be risky, but the story of Harry Hopkins proves the opposite. That constraint actually breeds effectiveness.
It's a phenomenal story. Hopkins was Roosevelt's advisor during World War II. He was desperately ill and could only work a few hours every other day. That physical constraint was absolute.
So he had to cut out everything that wasn't essential.
Everything. All the politics, the ceremony, the non-essential meetings. And he didn't become ineffective. He became hyper-effective. Churchill called him Lord Heart of the Matter because he only dealt with the most critical issues. It's a perfect example of how much you can cut away without losing any real effectiveness.
Beyond your own time, there are systemic time wasters. The first is the recurrent crisis.
If the same crisis happens more than once, it's a symptom of laziness. It's a problem that should be solved systemically, turned into a routine that a clerk can handle. The annual panic to get inventory done is a classic example.
A well-managed organization should be dull.
Dull in a good way. The drama should be in the big future-oriented decisions, not in constantly fighting fires from yesterday.
Like the old Defense Department spending spree at the end of every fiscal year.
A completely manufactured recurrent crisis. Everyone scrambled to spend the money before they lost it. It was pure nonsense. McNamara came in and fixed it with a simple accounting change that was legally possible all along. No one had bothered to think systemically.
The other huge time waster is meal organization, which usually shows up as way too many meetings.
Meetings are basically a sign that your organization is structured poorly. They should be the exception. If you're spending more than a quarter of your time in meetings, something is wrong. Work that should be in one person's job is probably spread across 5 different people.
Can you share that example of the power generation company? It's so clear.
Sure. This company had 3 divisions for power generation: steam turbines, jet engines, and atomic power. But these were all becoming substitutes for each other in the marketplace.
So they were competing and collaborating at the same time,
Yeah.
but they were in separate silos.
Right. And the result was, as Drucker puts it, a non-stop meeting for years, just to coordinate everything. The only fix was to restructure, put them all under one manager with a single energy strategy, and the meeting time just evaporated. The bad structure created the wasted time.
So after you've recorded, diagnosed, and cut out the systemic waste, the final step is to consolidate what's left.
Because that discretionary time, even after all that work, is still going to be small. Maybe a quarter of your total time, if you're lucky. And if it's in little 5-minute chunks, it's useless. You have to stitch it together into usable blocks.
This is the banker's 90-minute rule.
A legendary example. This bank president scheduled everything important in 90-minute blocks. His logic was that 90 minutes is the most you can concentrate effectively, but it's the least you need to get anything substantial done.
But the discipline was in how he protected that time.
Absolutely. His secretary's instructions were ironclad. No interruptions. The only people she was allowed to put through were the President of the United States and his wife. He was ruthless about protecting those blocks.
So whether you work from home one day a week or batch your operational tasks, the goal is the same. Create big chunks of time for the important work.
Know thy time isn't just a productivity hack. It's the foundation of self-knowledge. And once you have a handle on your time, you're ready for the next question. What should I be doing with it?
Which brings us to habit 2. Focusing on outward contribution. Once time is under control, you have to aim it. And the question he says to ask is, what can I contribute?
This is such a critical shift in mindset. It moves your focus from your own tasks, your own department, your own skills, and points it outward toward the results of the whole organization.
So it's not what are my job duties, but what is the unique value I can provide that moves the whole enterprise forward?
Exactly. And Drucker says you have to think about contribution in 3 specific areas. If you neglect any one of them, the organization starts to decay.
Okay, what are the 3?
First is direct results, the obvious stuff. Sales, profits, patient outcomes, the bottom line. Second is building and reaffirming values. This is the commitment to what the organization stands for, its character. And third is building and developing people for tomorrow, renewing your human capital.
And organizations get into trouble when those are out of sync.
Huge trouble. Contribution has to be clear. Look at his example of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It was torn between 2 incompatible values.
On one hand, maximum farm productivity. On the other hand, this romantic ideal of preserving the small family farm.
Those two things are in direct conflict in a modern economy. The result was that they spent enormous amounts of money and achieved neither goal effectively. There was no coherent contribution.
Now, for the specialist, the knowledge worker, this focus on contribution is even more important, right? Because they can get lost in their own expertise.
So easily. The specialist sees their knowledge as the end goal, but their knowledge is useless if no one else can use it. The contribution focus forces them to ask, who needs what I know and what form do they need it in so they can get their job done?
This is what creates real teamwork, not just another committee.
It's what he calls sideways communication. You start asking your colleagues, what do you need from me so you can make your contribution? It's proactive and based on real needs, not the org chart.
And this ties directly back to meetings, which we already identified as a huge time waster.
It's the cardinal rule for a good meeting. You have to state the specific purpose and the intended contribution at the very beginning. Are we here to make a decision? To inform people? To brainstorm ideas?
And then you hold the meeting to that standard.
Exactly. If the goal was to decide, and all you did was talk, the meeting failed. It's about discipline.
The Robert McNamara story is such a perfect example of someone being forced to redefine their contribution.
It is. At Ford, McNamara was the ultimate inside man. All about efficiency, numbers, internal logic. When he became Secretary of Defense, he was totally unprepared for the political reality of that job.
His old contribution model didn't work anymore.
Not at all. He had to ask himself, what is the unique contribution of this office? And he realized it wasn't just internal management, it was getting support from Congress. So he forced himself to master something he hated, politics and external communication, because this was what the job's contribution required.
Which is a perfect lead into habit 3, building on strengths. Because this is Drucker's most profound idea about people. You cannot build on weakness.
The entire purpose of an organization is to make human strength productive and human weakness irrelevant. If your main goal in hiring is to avoid weakness, you will only ever hire mediocre people.
He just demolishes the idea of the well-rounded person.
Throws it right out the window. Strong people have strong weaknesses. It's part of a package. If you look for the person with no sharp edges, you get someone who's just average at everything. Excellence is always specific to one or two areas.
And he suggested the manager who is obsessed with the weaknesses of their subordinates is often a weak manager themselves. They see strength in others as a threat.
A strong executive accepts that strength comes at a cost, but they know the output from that strength is worth it, which is why those historical anecdotes are so powerful.
The Lincoln and Grant story.
It's the best. People complain to Lincoln that General Grant drinks too much, and Lincoln's reply is just legendary. If I knew his brand, I'd send a barrel or so to some other generals.
Because Grant was the only one winning battles, that was his strength, and in the middle of the Civil War, that's all that mattered. The weakness was irrelevant.
General Robert E. Lee had the exact same attitude. Someone suggested he should get rid of a general who was difficult and insubordinate, and Lee just said, "What an absurd question he performs." The focus is relentlessly on the contribution.
So the question is never, how do they get along with me? It's, what do they contribute?
And how can I structure the organization to make their strength effective and their weakness harmless? Maybe you shield a brilliant but abrasive analyst from having to deal with clients directly. You build the organization around the strength.
This also means you have to avoid creating impossible jobs.
Yes. The job that looks logical on the org chart but requires two totally different kinds of people to do it well. The classic example is combining the head of sales with the head of advertising.
Two completely different personalities and skill sets.
Totally. Selling is about closing the deal now. It's relentless and direct. Advertising is about long-term brand building. It's conceptual and creative. If you put that in one job, you set someone up to fail. If a job keeps defeating good people, the job is designed wrong.
This also leads to his critique of the traditional performance review.
The Western appraisal is often just a conversation about a person's faults. It's uncomfortable for everyone and undermines the relationship between a boss and their subordinate. It's about fixing weaknesses, not building on strengths.
Which is the opposite of what he's advocating.
He pointed to the Japanese model, which focused on strength, and he suggested a 4-question appraisal. 1, what has this person done well? 2, what are they likely to be able to do well? 3, what do they need to learn to get the most from their strength? And 4,
The character test.
the character test. If I had a son or daughter, would I want them to work for this person? And this is the one place where weakness is an absolute deal breaker.
Lack of character and integrity.
It disqualifies everything else. A brilliant person with no integrity will destroy the spirit of an organization faster than anything. People model themselves after their boss. If the boss is corrupt, the whole team becomes corrupt.
So to wrap this section up, what about the other side of the coin? Managing your boss.
It's just basic prudence. Your own effectiveness is tied to your boss's success. The key is to figure out what your boss's strengths are and then make them productive.
It's not about being a sycophant, it's about being strategic.
It's about understanding how your boss processes information. If their strength is political, you lead with the political angle of your proposal. You present your ideas in a way that allows them to use their strength most effectively. You make them effective, and in doing so, you become effective.
So we know where our time goes, we're aiming it at contribution, and we're leveraging strength. That brings us to habit 4. First things first, concentration.
This is the secret to actually getting things done. Because your time is always limited, you have to concentrate it. And the paradox is, the more you concentrate on one thing at a time, the more things you actually get done, because you finish them faster and better.
But to concentrate on the new, you have to get rid of the old. The first rule is slough off yesterday.
This is so hard for organizations to do. You have to periodically review everything you're doing, every program, every project, and ask that brutal question. If we weren't already doing this, would we start it now?
And if the answer isn't a loud, unconditional yes, you have to kill it.
You have to. But it's difficult because failures usually die on their own. It's yesterday's successes that linger like ghosts, sucking up resources and your best people long after they've stopped being productive.
He calls them investments in managerial ego.
That's it. And he had a radical idea for government programs. He said every single one should have an automatic expiration date. Maybe 10 years. And it would only be continued if it could be rigorously proven to still be necessary.
Assume things become obsolete, don't assume they last forever.
Exactly. And this is how you free up resources for new things. You can't start a new venture by hiring new people. That's adding a second risk. You have to staff new things with your proven veterans, and the only way to do that is to take them off the old things that aren't working anymore.
Okay, so you've cleared the decks. Now you have to set priorities. And, more importantly, posteriorities.
Setting priorities is the easy part. Everyone loves making a list of what's important. The hard part is setting posteriorities, deciding what you're not going to do.
Because what you postpone, you effectively abandon.
And that takes courage, not analysis. Drucker's rules for setting priorities are all about courage.
Let's run through them.
1. Pick the future over the past. 2. Focus on opportunity, not on problems. 3. Choose your own direction, don't just jump on the bandwagon. And 4. Aim high. Aim for something that will actually make a difference.
I want to pause on that second one. Focus on opportunity, not problems. That goes against the grain for a lot of managers who see themselves as problem solvers.
It does. But solving a problem, at best, just gets you back to zero. It restores the old equilibrium. But seizing a big opportunity creates a new, better future. It takes just as much energy to solve a complex problem as it does to pursue a big opportunity. The payoff from the opportunity is infinitely higher.
And aiming high just acknowledges that any new thing is hard, so you might as well go for the big win.
Right. It's just as hard to launch a small new thing as it is to launch a big new thing. So aim for something that matters. This is how the executive becomes the master of their time and events instead of being a slave to them.
And that concentration leads directly to the final habit, habit 5. Making effective decisions.
Which is really the ultimate work of the executive.
Yeah.
And the first thing to understand is that effective executives don't make a lot of decisions. They make a few big fundamental ones.
And they start by classifying the problem. Is it generic or is it unique?
This is the first question. Most problems are generic. They're symptoms of an underlying issue that requires a new rule, a new principle. The biggest mistake is to treat a generic situation as a series of unique events, to be pragmatic when you need a principle.
He uses the early Kennedy administration's foreign policy as an example of that failure.
They treated every crisis on its merits, refusing to develop an overarching principle, even though it was clear the old post-war assumptions were dead. They were trying to solve symptoms without diagnosing the disease.
And the opposite mistake is just as bad. Treating a new event as if it's an old problem.
Like the 1965 power failure. The engineers saw signals that something completely unprecedented was happening, but they just applied the standard routine fix for a normal overload. They misclassified a unique event as a generic one.
So the effective decision maker assumes a problem is generic until proven otherwise.
And then the second step is to define the boundary conditions. What does this decision have to achieve? What are the minimum specifications for success?
And if you violate those, the whole thing falls apart. The military examples are so clear here.
The Schlieffen Plan in World War I, the core boundary condition was do not split your forces. But when things got tough, the generals panicked, split their forces, and the entire plan, the entire strategy collapsed.
Or the Bay of Pigs. The boundary conditions were contradictory from the start.
Totally. Kennedy wanted to overthrow Castro, but also wanted it to look like the U.S. wasn't involved. Those two specifications were impossible to meet at the same time. The decision was doomed before it was even made.
Okay, so you know the problem type, you have your boundaries. The third step is pure intellectual courage. Figure out what is right before you even think about compromise.
This came directly from Drucker's experience with Alfred Sloan at GM. Sloan told him, "Your job is to tell me what is right. Don't worry about if it's acceptable or if we can get it done. I know how to compromise, but I can't make the right compromise unless I first know what right looks like."
That's powerful. Why is it so important to define that ideal first?
Because you have to know the difference between a good compromise and a bad one. Half a loaf is a good compromise. You still get food, you satisfy the boundary condition. But a half a baby, like in the story of King Solomon, is a disaster. It destroys the whole purpose.
Right, so once you know what's right, you can move to step 4. Building action into the decision. A decision isn't real until it degenerates into work.
And this is where so many brilliant strategies failed. You have to ask, who needs to know? What action is required? Who is accountable? He tells that simple story of the company that decided to discontinue a product.
But they forgot to tell one purchasing clerk.
And that clerk, following the old rules, saw a surge in last-minute orders and bought enough parts to keep making the product for another 10 years. A huge financial loss, all because no one asked that simple, action-oriented question.
And the action has to be possible for the people who have to do it.
If you want people to change their behavior, you have to change how they're measured and rewarded. If the organization's incentives still reward the old behavior, that's what you're going to get, no matter what the decision was.
And the fifth element is the feedback loop. You have to check your assumptions.
And the only reliable way to do that is to go and look. It's the old military tradition of the commander tasting the troops' food. You can't just trust reports and data. With modern dashboards, executives are more removed from reality than ever. You have to get out of the office and see if the decision is actually working on the ground.
This all seems like a logical process. But then Drucker makes this radical claim. Effective decisions don't come from a consensus on the facts. They come from disagreement.
This is so countercultural. He says you don't start with facts, you start with opinions. Facts only become facts once you have a criterion of relevance, and you only find that criterion by testing different opinions against each other.
You need alternatives. You need dissent.
Alfred Sloan, again, is the hero here. At a committee meeting, if everyone was in complete agreement on a decision, he would postpone it. He'd say, let's put this off so we have time to develop some disagreement and actually understand what this is all about.
That's incredible. Why is disagreement so vital?
For 3 reasons. First, it's your only protection against a plausible but wrong idea. Second, it generates alternatives. If your first decision fails and you have no backup plan, you're just gambling.
Like Roosevelt having a totally different economic plan ready to go when his first one failed during the banking crisis.
Exactly. And third, disagreement is the best way to stimulate the imagination. You have to challenge ideas to make them stronger and more creative. The effective executive doesn't seek consensus. They seek well-reasoned, argued, and tested dissent.
And the very last check is to ask, is a decision even necessary?
Because every decision is like surgery. It's a shock to the system. You only act if the situation will get worse on its own or if there's a huge opportunity that will vanish.
And if you do act, you act decisively.
All in or not at all. No half actions. Half actions are always wrong because they fail to meet the minimum boundary conditions.
So that's the whole arc, the 5 habits. It really is a journey, isn't it? From something as simple as a time log.
To deep analysis of your contribution, to understanding human nature with strengths, and finally to the courage and character needed for concentration and big decisions.
It's not about being a genius. It's about enabling common people to achieve uncommon performance.
Which Drucker saw as an absolute necessity. Economically, it's how developed nations stay prosperous. But socially, it's even more important.
How so?
Because the knowledge worker is prone to feeling like a cog in the machine, alienated, bored, trapped. This path of self-development toward effectiveness is the only way to align their need for achievement and fulfillment with the organization's goals.
Which brings us to that final, really profound thought that underlies this entire philosophy.
It's his great realization. He said that to focus on weakness is fundamentally irresponsible. As a manager, you owe it to the organization, and more importantly, you owe it to the people who work for you, to help them get the absolute most out of whatever strength they have.
The job isn't to change people.
No, that's
Yeah.
impossible. The job is to multiply their capacity by building a system that puts their unique strengths to use.
So effectiveness isn't just a business skill. It's a moral choice, a responsibility that comes with authority.
It is. It goes way beyond just profit. It's about making our modern organizations productive, but also humane. You either learn this discipline or you risk becoming that paradox.
Huh.
The brilliant but strikingly ineffectual person.